Hey guys, welcome back to Defiant Joy. So yes, took the week off last week. There was a virus that got to our family, and what took my husband and our son just under 24 hours to get over, it's taken me over a week and a half. So being immunocompromised is very, very real. If I sound congested and, all my voice is kind of off, that's why. Because it is. But I didn't want to delay making this episode any longer. So basically, I've been thinking and praying for quite some time now, and thinking, if I put myself, looking, for YouTube videos to be encouraged or any kind of content for encouragement before I was disabled and before I got sick, right as I was beginning to get sick, what would I have wished that I could have come across? And episode is basically the answer to that. And I hope it blesses you guys because I think that some of the things that we are told when we are sick is extremely unhelpful, and sometimes it's even like crushing. And if you're listening to this and you're healthy, it might be uncomfortable for you at certain parts because maybe it's just hard to relate to, but maybe you've even said some of these things to somebody else. And I just want to challenge you to buckle in and hear what is being said because it might give you a new perspective. And I just thank you also for being here because that's a courageous thing to do, especially with the topic of this episode. That might be just a bit of a different outlook. So we'll go ahead and jump in. But yes, I want to talk about the 3 lies that we are told about healing. This is specifically for when we are disabled or chronically ill. So, line number one, and this is probably the most common one that I hear, is that you can control the outcome of your illness, whether that means go into remission, be cured, or some people even take it as far as to say you could have prevented it in the first place if you do these certain lifestyle changes. They would say, like, if you exercise this certain regimen, do this sort of yoga thing or whatever, then, you can, or this weight training or whatever it is, then you will start, healing your body. Or they'll say you need to eat this certain kind of diet. You need to eat an anti-inflammatory diet. You need to eat a Mediterranean diet. Or they'll say you need to eat vegetarian. You need to eat carnivore. And yes, I've heard the whole gamut of eat these things. You need to have this whole supplement regimen. You need to eat these herbal supplements, whatever it is. They'll say you need to sleep this much or do whatever. You need to have acupuncture, red light therapy, this, that, or the other thing. And they'll say basically if you do these things, you can take control of your health and this will stop happening. Or, yeah, like I said, some people take it so far as to say you could have prevented it, as though it's like my fault for not doing these things and failing, and now I have an autoimmune disease. And yeah, if you can relate to being told that, yeah, comment below. And yeah, don't call anybody out, please, but tell us, some of the things that have been unhelpful for you that you've been told. But I think something interesting to point out is when people say that to me, like they probably know me because they're like some random person that like sees me disabled with my dog, my service dog, and they're like, "Well, what happened to you?" And like I don't have to answer that question, but I like to educate people and tell them. And as soon as I say I have an autoimmune disease, yep, instantly there's some advice coming out from them. And like usually this is the person that's clearly not disabled and healthy, and they'll say blah blah blah. Well, they like don't even know anything about my life, which I think is amusing. Is that I was a elite athlete for all of my adult life and for much of my teenage life. I was very successful. I got a scholarship for Division II cross country track and field for college. I would medal in my age division in 5Ks for fun. I would get gold medals in jiu-jitsu, and I was an active police officer. I worked in a urban environment in the Midwest and on patrol at night shift. And then after that, I was a school police officer. You might be chuckling to yourself like, school police, haha, that's cute. Like, well, obviously you don't know what a school police officer does, especially in more urban areas. And anyone that's been around teenagers knows that they are not low key or chill. So, all that to say, I have had a very active adult life up until the point I got sick. And to do that, I had to exercise, I had to eat healthy and eat clean. I was never one to eat junk. I've never done illegal drugs. I've never smoked, never abused alcohol, all the things. Lived a very healthy life. And then, bam, autoimmune disease. So I'll be the first to tell you, you could check all the boxes and do all the right things and you still can wind up there. So Yeah, that's a big lie. And I think people say that because they wish to have an illusion of control in their life. They want to see that, like, this won't happen to me like it happened to them if I do XYZ. So when someone says that to you, you don't have to get irate about it, but just be like, take a deep breath and, just walk away because, I think there's a lot they don't understand about what you've been through and what you're going through. And it's just a whole new world perspective that they can't wrap their brain around. So have grace with people. The second lie that I have heard, and this is the most cutting one to me because, I am a believer in Jesus. My faith is in Jesus, and I hear this from other people who say their faith is in Jesus and within the church. And, I'll say, if you had more faith, you'll be made well. And I think this well meaning comment and advice comes from, where Jesus says to the woman, your faith has made you well. And, that's a beautiful story, but not everyone's pathway in life is the same as that woman in that story. And as I'll talk about later, there's other pathways to walk as well. And everyone's unique. I think we all have a different purpose and calling. But it's really cutting when people, who say, you expect them to help you in faith and encouragement. That's the message you're receiving. Now, I've even had someone say, you need to put your comfort with your situation aside and just believe that you can be fully restored. And I'll tell you what, and I bet you can relate to this if you're watching and you're sick, no one wants to be made well more than the sick person. So, when someone says that, they're like acting like, we want this. Like, no one wants to be back to doing jujitsu and being a police officer and running long distance and having all the fun than I do. Believe me. Next up is probably my husband and my son. They want, to see that again, but, they're still second to me. Like, no one knows what it's like to live in a body that was able and then is not able now. And so when people say that, especially if you have faith and you trust them as well in the family of believers, and they're saying that, just understand they're saying that most likely from a place of being well-meaning, but once again their vision is obscured with a perspective that they don't understand. But also there is a illusion of control that we can make a certain situation happen. And honestly, you guys, like, we don't know what pathway we're supposed to walk, and we don't know what other people are supposed to do. So we shouldn't be telling them what God's will is for them. Just pray for them, and hopefully they're praying for you if they're being honest, true friends, even if they're making mistakes and saying very cutting things like that. So have grace with people and understand that there is an illusion of control when they say that they have about their own life, and just have grace with them. And hopefully you can explain to them that that's not helpful and what is. And, if they're a real friend, they will listen and hopefully stop doing that. If they won't, I recommend getting distance from them because, it's a chronic illness or a disability. It's going to be stuck with you. You don't need someone feeding this into you, these lies into you, that's not helpful. Something that I found from my friends that are very helpful is that they don't say a thing. Like, what they do instead is they make space to do things that I love with them. So, I love art. We do art together. Love going on, seeing animals at the zoo or something. They'll make a time to do that. And they understand, like, you have to budget more time because Jasmine's coming and she has to walk slower and she has her dog, and they don't complain about that. But the fact that they're there with me and present, that means the most. Not that they're trying to offer any kind of advice, just being there. So I've told my friends, like, you doing that has been so helpful for me. So if there's something that you think of and you're like, I wish people that mean well would actually be well and do something, don't be afraid to tell them that. But do it with grace because, they are probably trying to help you. They just don't know how. The last lie that I want to talk about is the lie that this doesn't just happen to anyone. And like I told you, the exercise thing, guys, yes, it absolutely can happen to anyone. But, when people, like, see you, and they see that you are chronically ill or disabled, they might think, like, well, there must be something that you did to cause this to happen. You must have done something bad or something wrong. You didn't exercise enough. You didn't eat the right things. Some people take it so far as to say you sinned or it was some kind of lifestyle choice that you did. And, I don't know what your situation is. Maybe there is a consequence from something you did with, abusing a substance or an addiction or something. And obviously that can cause a disability or chronic illness. I'm not speaking on that. What I'm talking about is things that, you did not see coming. People might even say it's like, well, it's in your genetics. And sometimes, like, maybe you can be like, yeah, it runs in my family. But, interesting in my situation, they've done a whole full genome sequence on me. Nothing is, like, shown. So, like, there's no evidence for that either. And people are scratching their heads and, like, well, why did this happen to you? And I think still in the back of their minds is this illusion of control of saying, like, this can't just happen to anyone because they're afraid it could happen to them. And I just challenge you to think of that when someone says something like that. And yeah, if there's one demographic that anyone could fall into at any point in their life, no matter their age or sex or anything or occupation, it is being disabled or chronically ill. So I think that's something that I didn't realize when I was healthy. And I think it's something that most people don't understand because it's hard for me to admit, but when I was healthy, I took my health for granted until it wasn't there anymore. And when I say I took it for granted, like I said, I didn't abuse my health. I just expected it to always be there. And then one day it wasn't. And I think that's pretty normal for people. So when people, say something like that, have grace with them. But then it still leaves the innocent human question: why did this happen? Or what is this for? You know, I've never been one to ask, like, why me? Why me? I've never thought that. But I have thought, like, well, what is the reason? Like, why? Because, oh, yeah, I'm like, I haven't abused anything. I have taken care of my body. There is no genetic reasoning for any of this. And yet, here we are still. And so I think, we are absolutely allowed to ask Yahweh, what is this happening for? And there's evidence of that here. We see in the book of John 9:3, it says, so basically the disciples are walking along and they see a man that is born blind from birth. He's a grown man now, but he was born blind. And they start asking Jesus, why was this man, why was he blind? Like, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born this way? And that's paraphrasing there, but yes, you can look it up in John 9 if you want to see. But John 9:3, it says, "No, neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life." So, excuse me. Yeah, it says, why did this happen? Because they automatically assume he must have sinned. That's why it happened. And Jesus responds like, no, that's not why it happened. It happened so the work of God could be displayed in his life. And I just want to challenge you guys that if you're in that position of like, why did this happen? What is this for? Understand that was Jesus' answer in that situation. It was so that the works of God could be displayed in his life. And that might be the exact answer that's going on in your life as well. It might be for God's glory. And, you're like, well, God did this to me so like I could have it. Like, no. God doesn't, do bad things for us. His will isn't, harm for us, as we see in Jeremiah 29:11. But we live in a fallen world where bad things happen. We live in a fallen world where you could check all the boxes right and you could still be chronically ill. But, that doesn't mean that Jesus can't redeem the situation and use it for his glory. And so he can't display his mighty power in your life for others to see. So I just want to pray for you guys and encourage you in that way. Yahweh, we just thank you so much that you protect our hearts, especially when even well-meaning people, offer us information or advice that is not at all helpful. Lord, I just pray for people that might be receiving that kind of unhelpful information right now that is not advice at all. I pray that you would reinforce their heart and protect their hearts, Lord, with your truth, and that they would instead go to your word and see what you have to say. But Lord Jesus, I just pray that, if we have these questions of, what is the reason for this? You absolutely allow us to ask that question, and we should, Lord. So we just surrender our situations to you, Lord, and say, what is your reason for this? And as we see in the book of John 9, in verse 3, it says, it's so, your glory can be displayed in our life. So we just give that over to you, Lord, and we just pray that you would help us to remember that, especially when we get so exhausted and bogged down, especially when we might be hearing these lies from all sides of, these illusions of control that aren't real. But Lord, we know you're in control and you can redeem the situation. And whether that means that we are healed in this life on earth or we are healed in heaven, you promise to heal us someday. And that is a wonderful thing to look forward to. In your name, Jesus, amen. All right, guys, I love you. Stay defiant. Stay encouraged. See you next time.